Hi, welcome to Italian Women
And the stories we tell
with Erica Martin
and Diane Bovalino.
So today we're continuing our conversations with life as an empath. All of the glorious wonder and absolute confusion that comes with living an empathic life. And in case you've missed our first two segments that we did previously, it talks a little bit about the signs of what it's like to be an empath, things that you may be dealing with. And so today, thank you for all the questions and comments that have been written in. We're going to talk more about how confusing it is to be an empath and how sometimes it can be maybe overly diagnosed as something else or underdiagnosed as other things. And so I don't know, Diane, you want to kick off the conversation?
I do. So first, I want to just let you guys know, in case I wasn't clear, I'm an empath, and so is
this girl over here.
So I know we like to talk about what makes us experts. Right now, we're not saying we're experts, but we can tell you we're both empaths, and we've lived some years as empaths. And I did not know as an empath, so what I wanted to talk about is I always thought I had social anxiety.
I think so many empaths think that they have social anxiety because the symptoms are absolutely the same. The things that they struggle with are absolutely the same. And I also think as a therapist, if you don't mind jumping in here real quick, as a therapist, it was not something I ever thought to look for or screen for when I was meeting with a client and they'd come in and they'd say, hey, I have social anxiety. I'm in a situation where anytime I'm at a social event, I'm feeling overwhelmed. It like drains all my energy. I'm exhausted, and sometimes it can be intermingled with depression or a host of other mental illnesses or diagnoses. Now, having been on this journey, I'm a lot more knowledgeable to look for and ask probing questions around, are you empathic? Are you a highly sensitive person? Because oftentimes that's really what's at play. And it's not just your typical social anxiety. And so we both have suffered with that significantly. And it's like, yes, we do feel anxious in social situations, but there is a direct cause as to why we're feeling anxious in social situations.
And it's still, yes, I can go to social situations. People are like, come on, you are so social, Diane. And yes, we were talking about that before, before we were pulling our segment together here, and we love to be social, but yet it's
I love to be social. I'm even going to get closer to Miss Diane. How about that? All right, I'd love to be social with Miss Diane.
But and at the end of it's like energetically, and as an energy healer, I wanted to talk about that piece. Is energetically, I can be so and I'm talking about not like one-on-one when I'm social or in my small group of close friends, but when I'm in a large group socializing, at the end of that function, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, depending upon the magnitude of the event or how long it's sustained or whatever, there would be times where it would be like a day or two where I'm like, I'm just so mentally spent, I can't even get it together. But I didn't understand why. And so now as we talk about understanding empaths, there's a conversation to be had between what is the difference? I think we talked about this. What is the difference between being a highly sensitive person and being an empath? Well, in the most articulate, succinct way I can say that, it's that all empaths are highly sensitive people, but not all highly sensitive people are empaths. The distinct difference is, bless you.
Excuse me.
Bless you. The distinct difference is an empath will actually feel the other person's pain, frustration, whatever emotion it is, you actually feel it. It's kind of like you're fine, and all of a sudden you get hit with a wave of something. And you're like, well, what's wrong with me? And then you might realize it's actually belonging to someone else. And so that's the distinction. Highly sensitive people may feel what's going on around them, may be really in tune, but they're not feeling it as if they are the other person and experiencing it in that way. So whether you are a highly sensitive person or you're an empath, the same kind of rules apply in terms of being, exhausted, overwhelmed. How do you manage it? How do you protect yourself energetically? right? So whether you're an empath or a highly sensitive person, we're going to use the term empath as an all-encompassing thing, but not all things that apply to empaths may apply to all people who are highly sensitive. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we were talking about that before, because I was saying to Erica, like, let's talk about, what's the difference there, because I always wondered, myself, because an empath is highly sensitive.
Yes. And so there are some really good reads out there. One is the Empath Survival Guide, if anyone's interested in exploring it further. And the other part is just because there are like the highlights, and Diane and I ran through them last time, like what are the key features of being an empath, what are some of the things you struggle with, etc. You don't have to have all of them, to qualify as being an empath. And you might find, well, I'm a highly sensitive person, I'm a highly in tune person, but I don't necessarily feel and take on energetically what other people feel, and that's okay. But you're taking it on in some way, because you're acknowledging it, you're absorbing it, you're participating in that energy, whether you're conscious of it or not. So I guess part of our segment is really just about bringing this to your consciousness, and then discussing ways on how to safeguard yourself, protect yourself, or maybe even strategize ways on how to get other people to help you when you're feeling overwhelmed in that anxiety and in that energy.
So I'll make sure, I'm pretty sure we started with, how do you know you're an empath? It's Life as an Empath. I believe it's episode 7. I'll make sure it's in our episode notes, so you can go back and check it out. So I'll make sure to clarify that and put that in there, so you can go back and listen. So we want to let you know that. But what's our next,
Well, the other part is, I think some of the questions that were raised were, well, how did I become an empath? Or what is the recipe? Oh, hold on a second. Speaking of recipes, you know who I have?
Oh, who?
Luigi Del Fuego. As we make recipes for a more delicious life here on our channel, he comes with all the right ingredients. I don't know why he's just too cute. We have to include him. We do. Special guest speaker. Speaking of which, we're gonna have more guest speakers coming on shortly. But people were asking, like, how does one become an empath? What are the ingredients? What are some of the things that kind of create an empath, so to speak?
I think it happens.
I think so.
I think you're born one.
I agree. I would take it a step further and say, I think we're all born with the capacity to be an empath.
But there's only 2% of us in the world.
And then people will say, well, there's only 2%. How do you all find each other? Energetically, we find each other. Right?
Listening to our podcast.
Absolutely.
I'm finding souls coming through my door at Lotus Soul Healing Arts.
Love it. Well, same here. Same with my practice, art and counseling. But the joy is that once you start really understanding and participating in the importance of energy and how that energy is showing up in your life, showing up in your work, then it's like I start collecting empaths like seashells at the beach. Like they're all beautiful and distinct and unique in their own way. And when I began to open up, I think you kind of open a door energetically for other people to begin to show up. So even though we may be a small percentage of the population, I believe wholeheartedly that we're all kind of hardwired to be able to connect energetically in any way that we choose. I think it kind of gets conditioned out of us. When you think about it, like all of our creativity, our uniqueness, our don't be so sensitive, like all these things kind of get pushed away. And it's more about like, don't, be strong, do what you got to do, don't be emotional,
Right.
And as a young child, when that becomes your message, I think it becomes deconditioned out of our natural state. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. And that's why a lot of what you and I offer together is about, which the more you spend time with us, the more you're going to find out about what we offer.
And we're delightful.
Yes. And that's about, coming back to the core of your authentic self.
Yeah. Who you are, who you were meant to be, and not all these layers, like peeling back layers of the onions, all the things we were taught or indoctrinated into, or our culture. We talked a little bit about that. But the interesting fact about empaths, at least the data I've seen, the studies I've researched, is that most empaths do come from pretty tumultuous family situations. they usually have some history of childhood trauma. And so there's two ways of looking at that. One could be, well, because they came from childhood trauma, they now have overactive imaginations and they're calling it being an empath. I guess we could argue, you're free to think that. The other school of thought is because they grew up in tumultuous family situations where there was a lot of conflict or chaos, that young child learned to nurture their instincts, right? Because there's
beautiful.
Right, because there's always, it didn't come from a beautiful situation, but they learned to become hyper aware. You know, like if let's say the two parents are fighting or there's alcoholism or drug addiction in the family or whatever it is, that young child learns, like, through intuition and really honoring their intuition, I know not to make any trouble over here. I know mom or dad are in a bad mood over here or something's off. And they rely on that intuition for survival, right? So it makes sense that as they continue to grow, that instinct becomes stronger. They have that hyper awareness, and then that becomes really more what we're calling an empath. So to me, the empaths I have seen, worked with, and met have had some degree of childhood trauma. That doesn't always mean that it has to be something horrific, but it can come from childhood distress, let's say. Chaos within the family, inconsistency in the family, a lack of emotional safety. So if they couldn't rely on the parents to give them what they needed, they had no choice but to rely on their own instincts, which is how they learned to survive and grow. And so if you're an empath out there right now listening to this, or a highly sensitive person, it doesn't mean that's how this developed for you. I'm just saying, statistically speaking, there's a higher percentage of people who are empathic who've had really that as a survival strategy.
And that's just data. So we all don't fit data. I mean,
Right.
I'm not against the data, and that's why she's a counselor and I'm the energy healer. Yeah.
No,
yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
I'm just saying, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense to
No,
me.
it's good. Right.
Makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
to me, because
Yeah.
that child who has to be in that state of hyper awareness, like for their own safety and protection, has no choice but to rely
Right.
on their intuition, right?
Right.
So the more they rely on that,
They're
the
going
more
to-
fine-tuned it becomes, right? And then they kind of
Yeah.
take that into their adult life. That's like their way of knowing and protecting. It's those that, let's say, weren't in those situations and had all of their fundamental needs met, they would never have to rely on their intuition.
Because
There would be
yeah,
nothing
they-
threatening,
Right.
right? So yes, that's not an exact recipe.
Right.
I think you're born with it.
Right. I agree.
The
I agree.
opposite could be true. You could be raised in a family that is really empathic and really fosters that in you from the beginning. There's an example of how it doesn't come from trauma, but somehow it's being nurtured. Somehow it's being brought to the surface.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I'm just saying, if you're that person out there, don't think that you're not an empath.
Or that
That's
you
not
have
what
to
I'm
have
saying.
trauma.
Yeah.
Or
that's
that
not- yeah.
empaths all come from a place of trauma. No, I agree with you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not the message.
Yeah,
that we wanna
but data is important.
Yeah.
But not all data. Right. Not all of us fit in that. What am I trying to say? That
box.
yes. I'm thinking about that. Oh, what do we learn in college? So what is that?
The hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I'm thinking now. Oh, that's scary if I'm thinking.
So, speaking of data though, and not fitting into the box, we began by saying how many people are diagnosed with social anxiety, depression, and other things, when really it's a manifestation of.
I diagnosed myself with social anxiety because I just wanted to run out, out the party door most of the time.
Well, me too. I didn't understand why though. I'd be like excited, it would be fun, I'd be looking forward to an event, and then I would get there and I'm like, this is horrible. Like my chest would start pounding, or I'd start getting like shaky, or I'd go to talk and I would be like, I'm not even making any sense, or I couldn't absorb what other people were saying. I was just so distracted and overwhelmed by everything and everyone going on around me, that now that I know it though, I prepare differently going into those situations, or I don't go into them at all, really, if it's just not worth my energy to do that.
Yes. Or you can or I learned to prepare, like you said, it took me much longer in life, and now I know I can help other people prepare,
Yeah.
especially like young girls I see. Like I was at a gathering last night, and the young girl was, you know, nervous, and I'm like, I know what you do. You just ask someone a question about themselves, because everyone likes to talk about themselves.
Well,
Nothing wrong with that.
oh,
And I was like, she was so amazing though. I think she was like 16, and she's like, well, I'm fine talking to adults, but when I have to go talk to like someone my age, but she's like, I plan it out. But I'm thinking, she is so, and I didn't think like that. I was just like, she's like, you are amazing, I said to her.
you know, the other part is if you have that significant other or close friend who really knows that you struggle with these things, it's like, to me, it's like, have a plan. Like, have a buzzword or something that you can say to that person other than, you know, I don't want to be here. So, but like jelly beans, you know, chocolate chip cookies, whatever, like a word that could easily be integrated into it, or just even tuck them aside and say like, really, I gotta go, or I need to step out for a few minutes. Can you help me? Or I need to catch my breath, or whatever, or just cover me, you know, or lead the conversation for a few minutes. Because those without social anxiety will most likely not even have a problem doing that and will understand. And it reminded me when Diane and I were doing prep work, if my former client is out there, I want you to know, I think of this story often. I think of you often. But it was many, many years ago. It was new in my career, and the woman suffered with like the most profound social anxiety, which is what we were calling it.
Okay.
Right? Because at the time, I really didn't know to question and look for empaths as part of this, right? So we're strategizing all these different ways, and her biggest complaint was that her significant other did not understand it, minimized it, poo-pooed it, was kind of like, get over it, you know, it's fine, have a drink, you know, whatever. And she's like, that's not a solution for me. I just want you to understand. So after years of really trying to get the husband to understand, I said, I think you're going to have to come up with a way that shows him what that experience is actually like for you. You know, I said, be creative. And she's a real creative soul. I know you're out there listening. I know you are.
I bet she is.
And she came back and she's like, okay, I came up with a creative way. And I said, what was it? She said, I sat my husband down. I had jump ropes that the kids were using, and I asked him to sit in a chair. I tied his feet up with the jump ropes. I tied his arms up with the jump rope. I started playing like loud, like Metallica music in the background. And I started hitting like pots and pans. And I was like, isn't this fun? Like, don't you just want to talk to me? Isn't this amazing? Like, that's great. And he was like, what are you doing? This is horrible. I feel totally overstimulated. And she's like, this is what it's like for me all the time. And he may not have understood why, but he understood as an experience. It wasn't just something that you're going to say like, okay, like stop feeling uncomfortable now. Right.
Right.
And I thought she did a brilliant job of doing that. And so getting our partners to at least try to get them to understand. And if they can't, at least get them to recognize like where your limits and boundaries are so that they can help support you. Because I think that's huge.
I agree.
Because we both struggle with the same. So when we're in a social event, maybe you're tapped out before I am, or vice versa, and I can come to you. Like our fundraiser or like other things that we've done socially, right?
Yeah, I was exhausted after that.
I slept like the whole next day. I slept the whole next day.
I mean, I'll be honest, like I think after I don't know how many hours I'm being honest, I was wanting to leave.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot to just the noise. For me, like the noise, the band's playing, and then the people, it was just a lot to take in being an empath.
Well, and then on top of it, we were responsible for the event. We were the person to socialize. We were the person to make sure everything was running smoothly. We had all the behind the scenes kind of things and the venue. So I'm so glad we did it, by the way. I just want to give a whole lot of love out to the Ray Kemper family. I hope that you're seeing this and that you're doing well. And we did well. I mean, for Wednesday rainy evening, I think we came in with over $11,000 for a few hours.
And it wasn't rainy. It was like a full-fledged, storm.
Yeah.
I mean, storm, wind.
Monsoon.
Yeah. I mean, that's
people came. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And in the end, I mean, like we put our heart and soul into it. We just didn't do a little thing. I mean,
that was kind of a big event.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done it any differently. I mean, we were so blessed, and the bands that donated their time, and you know, they had quoted us a price, and then they got there and they said, oh no, like we're not even going to charge you. Like it was a beautiful, beautiful day. But even in those beautiful moments, you know, I guess we're talking a lot about the anxiety and the stress part, but there's also the beautiful part of being an empath is when you feel people's joy, right? When you feel their excitement and their energy, and that can really fuel you and boost you up. And that was kind of the jet fumes I was running off to get me through the rest of the event, because I was just feeling, you know, that love and energy from the family. But then the second we closed the doors and walked away, I was like, I felt too much for too long, for too many people. I need to just unplug, right? Because we don't want to be those two empty cups clanging around.
Yes. And I just know the electronic work that I put in getting the podcast
Oh my God,
out,
Diane.
and the non-sleeping, which is not healthy, as we'll talk about for empaths. But I know for me, I mean, I don't think I, you know, could talk or text for over a day, which isn't me, because we connect a lot, but I had to shut down. And then that wasn't even enough to refuel. But again, like, you know, when we do things, I think also as empaths, I find I don't do things, I put myself into it. I put my heart and soul into probably everything I do.
We don't halfway, because it's not possible to halfway when you're an empath. So it really is
another piece that we didn't even talk about. We're just getting into right now, which is a great part, I would say, of our podcast. We're trying to plan things out a little bit, because we really do shoot from the hip, but we thought, oh, we better start planning a little bit now that we're really full-fledged to your podcast.
Yes.
But still, there's always going to be a piece that we're just going to throw in there.
Yeah. And the feedback from others like motivates us to want to speak to things that we know you want to hear, right? That you're excited or interested in hearing. But the reason I think that empaths don't do things half-heartedly is because you're doing it for yourself, for the intended audience, for the intended person or people that you're doing something for. And when we don't give 100%, which is a dangerous thing, actually, we feel like failures. We feel like we haven't satisfied our soul's purpose, or we haven't done things in like perfectionistic kind of way. And I think letting go of that was a big part of us showing up here, getting rid of that perfectionism, giving your 100%. And it's okay if that 100% isn't perfection. But, you know, for empaths, it's really hard. That perfectionistic kind of thread runs throughout all empaths. And if we do believe the premise, the data, that it goes back to like some childhood trauma and having to be always, what did you say, dutiful daughter or whatever, it makes sense that perfectionism would kind of tie into it as well.
And it's not even like I would say that it was expected that I was supposed to be that. I think I put a lot on myself, and I know, you know, I've always just done that.
But think about it. If we feel what everyone else feels, and we do, then we feel the other person's disappointment in us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Or frustration, or perceived even. It might not even be real, but that's like our projected. We're safeguarding from someone being disappointed in us. We're safeguarding from someone being frustrated or unhappy with us. And so I think that's really more of where the perfectionism comes from, is like, I don't want someone else to be disappointed in me. I don't want to feel that disappointment. Because at some point we felt that somewhere. Yeah. Whether it was a teacher,
right,
whether it was a friend, a situation. And so much I think of our need to do things with that perfectionistic tendency is because we just don't want to feel that disappointment, and then worse yet, we're responsible for it. Makes sense?
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know this, and that statistically, I would imagine empaths are extremely intelligent, I would say, statistically.
Yeah, they tend to be of higher intelligence and certainly more right-brained, like that, more creative, communication centered. But the last thing I saw is that they're like pretty equal in right and left brain, right? That right hemisphere that's all creative, language oriented, and the left side, which is logical and problem solving. Because you really would have to be both, I guess, to be an empath, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's like my brain doesn't, it's like I have to like expel a lot of this energy for this brain to shut down.
Or it doesn't. And they're pacing the floors at night. When she and I first got COVID and we're in bed, go, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do with our time? Can't just be laying here. Gotta do something, right? So, and here we are. We decided to do something valuable with our time. So you had some questions,
I know.
or you had some. Someone wrote in, I think Liz.
Liz, yes, Liz from where is she from?
Harrisburg?
Yes, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay, she wrote in, let me give this to you, Erica. She wrote in, so Erica and Diane, I had to go to my boyfriend's work party. And I'm not sure if I'm an empath. I've been listening to your podcast here, trying to figure that out. So I went to the party. I did not want to go to this party. I went to the party. I think I had a good time, but for some reason, I'm pretty sure I had a good time. But why did I sleep for 2 days? Like what is the 411? She said I slept for 2 days.
Well, I think given what we talked about, that kind of explains. Do you want to start? I mean, I feel like I'm doing a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, I would say, Liz, I do believe you had a good time, but as an empath, you absorbed everybody's energy first. As an energy, you absorb their energy.
Even when you're not conscious of it.
Yes.
That's the key. Even when you're not conscious of it.
You then you expelled your energy. Well, you're absorbing their energy, right? Then we're expelling our energy.
And the energy around the actual event situation, was there dancing, music, whatever. I mean, there's all of that environmental stuff that's going on as well.
And then the time that you had the time, right? Also the time up to this event, thinking about the event, thinking about what you might talk about there. What are you going to wear? How are you going to process while you're there? I mean, that's all energy also being expelled.
And did she say it was an office party for the boyfriend?
Yeah.
And that's the other part. Wanting to make a good impression, maybe like how much stress or pressure was put on you. Did the boyfriend say, oh, I'm not saying he did, but I really need you to make a good impression, or I want you to do this, or we have to, that's a whole other layer of
and we don't
stress.
know how long she's been dating the boyfriend.
Well, that's true too. Liz, you got to give it, you know what? Feel free to write us back. We would love to hear this, and we could certainly respond in writing to elaborate on some of our answers.
Look it up, episode, again, I'll put it in the notes. I think it's episode 7 so we get that answer if you're an empath.
Yeah, and sleeping for 2 days. I mean, is that the healthiest way? No. If you're sleeping for 2 days, you overdid it. That's the bottom line. If you're that exhausted, you overdid it. And I guess what I would like you to look at moving forward is, empath or not, empath or highly sensitive person, you're taking on and absorbing a lot. And so if you don't have a way of grounding yourself and relaxing, like Diane and I over the years have figured that out, whether it's yoga or Reiki or meditation or acupuncture or, therapy, whatever that may be for you, then it's just like it keeps piling up and piling up and piling up, and then there's no place for you to put it. So I'd say if you were that exhausted after that event, there was probably a lot more going on than just the actual event, but that was enough to kind of like tip it over.
Yeah, right.
Or it could have just been that stressful an event, depending on how much emphasis was placed on meeting, this person's work and colleagues and all, and all of that. But you overdid if you were that exhausted. And so this is where it goes back to the part of the conversation, Diane, where I said, let your partner know. Sometimes there's that embarrassment or that shame of like letting people know. I mean, I knew it was for me in the beginning. I would rather die than tell someone I'm feeling socially anxious or overwhelmed. Like, I don't know why I felt that way. I think I felt like maybe ashamed, or like I should have it together. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Like the shoulds and the shouldn'ts of how I should and shouldn't feel. But if you can, let your partner know like what a toll that took on you and how really exhausted you were after that and why.
And then I should have left earlier.
Yeah, probably. Or stepped out, took some breaks away. You know, I don't know what you tried or didn't try, but that would be something I would add. Certainly. Certainly.
Maybe he went home and took an Epsom salt bath. I was just thinking that.
Oh,
or even the next morning.
Yeah.
The next morning.
That just wipes the filth away out of my life.
Showers are good too, because sometimes I don't want to take a bath.
It does take a little more time.
You can take a shower with I use the rock salt and put that over my head and then rub that all over me.
Tell me more about that. What? You got rocks in your head? What were you saying?
I usually have rock salt. Yeah, rub it all around here.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I've heard something.
You just buy it at the store. You don't need to buy anything special.
Yeah.
Just go down the what do you call it, the bacon aisle with the spices.
Well, good to know. I didn't know that. But the other thing is like light some candles, do some grounding, breathe. If you remember that you can control so much through your breathing. When we're in that anxious energy, right? We're in that shallow breath. It's like all up here. It's like, you know, and then if you can practice like that deep breath, one of the practices I do is like 5 breaths in. It's like bringing in 5 good things and then 10 breaths out, exhaling 10 negative things. And it's like repeat that over and over again until maybe you can actually calm yourself, get out of the head, right? Get more into the physical body because the body's reacting and then the head is following, or vice versa. The thoughts are happening and then the body's following. So we were talking.
Just lay in Shavasana and that's corpse pose for yoga and play some meditation music. That just get right on, the radio.
Yeah, and YouTube has wonderful chakra clearings.
Yeah.
They have guided meditations. Like if it's something you need a little assistance with that you're not like quite able to get to that space on your own, you can certainly do that. And one of the things Diane and I we were talking about, was it yesterday maybe? How COVID has impacted life for us as empaths. I mean, what were we saying? It's like we had a higher tolerance than we ever realized for things, and now COVID is kind of like reminded us.
I was mentioning that I know now when I go out, even just to get something to eat and meet up like with another couple, if we're at a restaurant that's playing like a restaurant bar and they're playing music or there's a band there, I cannot handle the noise and I want to go somewhere else.
And I said, are you sure you're not just getting old?
Yeah. And I threw something at her. Yeah,
yes, you did.
And it wasn't Luigi.
Luigi Cafe.
Because I wouldn't do that.
He's too cute.
He's our only unpaid employee.
Yes, absolutely.
Our only employee. Yes, of course we don't pay.
We can't pay ourselves. Yes, we're working on it.
But yes, and then we talked about, thanks to COVID though, you mentioned a good point about, even though it's called COVID-19, it really put us all at home in COVID.
2020. And when you think about it, when you refer to 2020, at least in terms of like eyesight or vision, it's like crystal clear vision. All things are in perspective, right? And so maybe it is not coincidental that COVID happened in 2020, that it does have a way. I think all of us who have gone through this, and we've gone through this together, hopefully, it has reprioritized, I think, our lives, our values, how we spend our time, how we wish to spend our time, and for those that really struggled through COVID, it was certainly going to be a push for you to become comfortable in sitting with yourself and spending time with yourself. So if you had struggled with that, COVID was certainly going to make that dramatically more challenging. And for those of you who didn't recognize how much you enjoyed the sanctity of being with yourself, of having that quiet space, of uncharging from the world, unplugging, right? To me, it was like a blessing.
Oh, I know.
At
first it wasn't.
Well, I mean, how it evolves is obviously a blessing to many.
Oh, I know. I meant at first being stuck in the house. I didn't mean that. Okay.
It's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. But yeah, no, to me, it was like, I had my parents' issues. My dad was just diagnosed and was really sick. And then, I'm running a business, and COVID allowed me the luxury of like being able to do both, like be with my family in Pennsylvania
Mhm.
and still run my business because everything was remote. Prior to that, it was always choosing, you know, if I'm with my family, I feel guilty that I'm not at work. If I'm at work, I felt guilty. And this has kind of like forced me to reprioritize everything, including even my work itself, where I'm now more virtual than I have ever been. And I
Yeah,
couldn't have
that's great.
imagined a couple of years ago ever doing virtual therapy. I thought, oh, that's
Bet.
not possible. And in some ways, I find it's actually more successful for some of my clients. It takes away the stress and 695 traffic
Oh, I bet.
and rushing and, you know, being able to squeeze it in, you know, their lunch break or other things during the day. So
And I never thought I would have gone into distant Reiki like I did in my business.
yeah, I
But-
would have thought that would have been impossible actually
But
prior to
because of COVID, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this distant Reiki, and it's fantastic. It's no different.
So I think it's all been about the whole journey about seeing things more clearly, right? With 2020 vision. Right?
And
And-
picking and choosing how we want to spend our time and what do we want to do with our time, which is how this, and I know that was one of the questions that we also got, which is how this podcast came about. But one of the questions was, what was that? How did you to start
Oh, get this podcast
podcast
started.
started? That was from Jenny in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, and I think at some point that was my bad handwriting. I'm sorry.
I was
My
not
curse
gonna
is
say that.
penmanship. It was a little flowery on that one. But I think she also said, like, how did you like physically actually begin to do this? And you know what, Jenny, we could do a whole podcast on how many sleepless nights, and Diane, God bless her, because as we've established from the beginning, I'm not the technical expert. So, you know, learning how to get the podcast running, consulting with people. I'm gonna give a shout out. What do you think? To Bridget Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Yes.
Bridget Oppenheimer, we love you. You're amazing. This woman has volunteered her time. You know, she's been our photographer. She's helped put together all of our videos. She's done some editing. I mean, God bless her. She's been amazing. So just a big shout out to Bridget. So the bottom line is, Jenny, we had a wonderful group of people who believed in our project and wanting to help us get the message out, help people in our very virtual world right now. And so that became a blessing. And here we are. And much more to learn. I think we're finding as we are on this journey.
Yeah, I think I'm still plugging along on, you know, I'm gonna get us out there on Apple Podcasts. I'm gonna figure that out. So I'm still plugging along. So yeah.
And
it's
until
been a
then, we're
great-
just going to have Bridget,
great- yeah, it's great.
Luigi Del Fuego,
And Diane and Erica.
and we're signing out for today.